Hey there everyone, Coach Mark here. Before we dive into today's topic, make sure to find me over on Instagram as Coach Mark Estrillo. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time. Odds are really good. I'd love to work with you. And if you hit the link down in the bio, you can apply for coaching today. But with that being said, let's get into it. So in today's video, we're going to be talking all about this guy right here and his big win at Miami's Baddest, first place in the 120 kilo class. So Chris here won Miami's Baddest in the 120 kilo class, as I just said. He won 3 of the 5 events outright and tied on the other 2. He took this show by a 5-point margin. Now, over the 7 weeks of prep leading into the show, he was also able to squeeze out a 60-pound PR on his axle deadlift, which is a really big PR in that short amount of time. Now, it's worth mentioning this isn't the first show he actually won underneath my programming. He did win Florida's Strongest Man as well using the free program I wrote for that, and if you hit my channel, you'll find a video breakdown where I discuss that programming. Now, the 7 weeks that I'm going to be discussing in today's video, I'm not going to give you every single small detail. Think of this as just a good general 10,000 feet in the air perspective, and I'll also be discussing some of the key principles to help you be successful when it comes to programming for your strongman shows. So the show, typical format, had 5 events. Now, before I wrote a single day of training, what I did is I mapped out what the events were, which ones shared demands, and which ones needed more isolated attentions based off what he was telling me. Everything in this program traces back to one of those 5 events, and a lot of the movements we selected were done to help improve multiple events at once. Ultimately, when it comes to strongman, if your accessories are not subservient to improving key indicator lifts for the main event, they're not doing anything. And as far as the events go, we had a log clean and press for reps, a heavy yoke carry, a keg and sandbag carry medley, an axle deadlift for reps, and then a stone carry to load. So event numero uno was a 285-pound log for reps. Now, there were 3 main things we focused in on as far as improving the log. We wanted to make sure to work on the implement itself, obviously, and we wanted to do a bit of a loading wave where we started with volume, then we did some singles, then it was deloading, and then a sharpening week. So for example, week 1, we did 3 sets of 5 at 245 to 265. And then in week 2, we moved on to singles. Week 3, we did alternating singles and doubles. And then by that point, the idea here was the log is as much a skill lift as it is a strength lift. So we wanted to make sure that the implement was getting high frequency of touches. Second to that was building raw pressing power. And this is where we opted for movements such as an axle floor press with long pauses or slow eccentrics. I think the axle floor press is one of the best supplemental movements for a strongman athlete during a peak phase because you're going to be able to handle a very high amount of weight. It helps tune your nervous system to handling those heavy loads, but the range of motion is also cut a little bit short, so it's going to be a little bit easier on the shoulders and really give you nice tricep overload. And then in addition to that, we would also work the log on a secondary day by doing stuff such as pause dip drives to help improve the rack position and the dip drive mechanics themselves, which are so very important on this implement, as that rack position where the log is further out in front of you, it's less forgiving of any technical deviations. And then the last thing we really focused in on was just sort of everything else. Arnold presses, half kneeling landmine presses, behind the neck pull downs, Lou raises. None of that was really glamorous. These aren't very sexy exercises. We also didn't really change them much from week to week. But that's the point. They're there as insurance. They're there to help build the floor of strength in case things go awry. They kept the shoulders healthy through the heavy log work. Now, with this too, as far as how the result went, this was a full field tie. Unfortunately, everyone zeroed the log. But there's a valuable turn in this, and it's something that I think a lot of strongman athletes could really help to think about, and that is every single event is worth the same amount of points. Chris could have zeroed the log and let that ruin his entire day. Instead, he grit his teeth and moved forward. Every single event matters in a show, and as we continue on through the event-by-event breakdown, you're going to see just how little this log actually mattered by the end of the day. Now, next up was the yoke event, 1,000 pounds, 40 feet. This one is the one we actually trained the least. It was a total of 4 sessions across these 7 weeks, and one of those sessions was done after weigh-ins where I just had him hit the empty yoke and move around with it. And this is something that I think is really underrated for a strongman athlete. After weigh-ins, play with the event kit if you have the ability to do so. Every axle handles a little differently. Every yoke feels a little bit different. It's just one of those things where by doing that, you're helping hedge your bets. The yoke itself is very high CNS, very high injury risk, but the skill component also doesn't require as much practice to maintain. Once an athlete knows their brace, their gait, and knows how to recover from a stumble as well as how to pick it efficiently, you don't need to grind it every single week. You can focus on maintenance. Our peak yoke session actually came in week 4. 2 runs at 950, which was near comp weight, plus a static hold a little above comp weight. We also integrated in some extra picks, recognizing that he was likely going to need them come event day. The static hold, that's just a confidence builder so he could feel it on his back. He got the bar heavier than anything he was actually going to do come showtime. And then comp day, it helped that 1,000 pounds just feel a bit more familiar. You'll see powerlifters sometimes do this with their squat or their bench press where they just do heavy unracks to feel the weight. And again, we did not do the yoke every single week. The structural work that helped support the yoke, on the other hand, this came every single week. This was stuff such as planks, adductors, and hamstring curls. These also helped build his deadlift. Ultimately, we did this to help prioritize proper recovery because everything at this show was really friggin' heavy. And as far as how that turned out for him, he took the event by first place. Alrighty, next up here was the carrying medley. We had a 350-pound keg and then a 300-pound sandbag for a distance of 40 feet. Now, for the first couple weeks, we did not actually train the medley directly. We did some proxy work in the form of sandbag and keg heart shocks, just getting him used to the pickup and transition with these implements. And then in week 3 was when we started doing live fire exercises, so to speak. We would do 2 runs, competition style, but closer to about 80% loading here. And also that first run would be done at roughly 80% speed. And the idea was just getting him used to the transition between the implements and sort of feeling out how he was going to move between them come competition day. By week 6, we were working with competition weight, just 1 full send run, for example. Additionally, our big focus here was just making sure that he would stay fresh. So often, these would be done later in the week. That way he had already accumulated a little bit of fatigue, as these were the 3rd event in the show. This strategy paid off really nicely. He took home the event win, first place. Our next event was the axle deadlift, 600 pounds for reps. Now, the big thesis I had here when programming his axle deadlift was this was the 4th event in the show. You had the log, and then you had 2 moving events. So there was going to be a substantial degree of posterior chain fatigue going into this. So we wanted to make sure that rather than just focusing on the absolute ceiling of his strength, we would bring up the floor of his capability. Because his CNS was not going to be fresh. His posterior chain, not going to be fresh. So the first 2 weeks, what we did here was load acclimation. Heavy triples and then some back offsets. Some heavy doubles and then some back offsets. Week 3 was sort of the hinge week where we had him pulling multiple heavy singles in one session from anywhere between 455 to 545. By end of session, he was pulling 545 with a substantial amount of fatigue, which was matching his old PR on the axle, which is exactly what we wanted. Because if he could match his old peak and that became his new floor, we knew competition day, this worst case scenario would still match his old best, and that's where that 60-pound PR came from. And then after week 3, from there, it was just a matter of keeping his CNS tuned, pulling singles, and just letting him feel it out. Accessory work stood the same these entire 7 weeks. Wide grip rows, glute ham raises, banded hamstring curls, planks. Again, just posterior chain insurance, plus these carried over to everything else we had going on in the show, aside from the press for, well, obvious reasons. Now this particular event was the big difference maker as he took first place on it with 1 rep and the rest of the field wound up zeroing it. So this put him in a very strong mathematical lead as we went into the final event. And then our final event was a stone carry to load, approximately 350 feet, carry it. And then the final event of the day was the stone carry and load, roughly 350 pounds. You pick it up, carry it 20 feet, dump it over the bar, pretty basic operation. Now, as far as training for it, it was relatively simple in that we just did stone picks and walks that have him do some steps with it. Early on, we also made use of proxy movements such as a Zercher triple extension, and the idea here was this would help him build the position necessary for a good stone load, as well as midline endurance for that stone carry. We cut this proxy in week 3 in favor of more specificity, and then also worth mentioning is during the deload week, we had him do some sandbag bear hug squats just to help retain that brace pattern without generating too much fatigue. Now, as far as how the event went, he zeroed it, but in this case, Chris had mathematically already won the show, so it was completely unnecessary to do the event. So as far as your big takeaways here when it comes to programming for a strongman show, reverse engineer, work backwards from what the events are. Pick the events, then determine what you need to be successful in them. Are you strong enough? Do you have the conditioning? Do you have the necessary skill? Because if you don't have those things identified, then you're sort of just throwing darts at the wall. Secondly, specificity is king in a peak. I'm a big fan of a very wide style of training in the off season. Get strong at everything from multiple angles, but then as you move into a competition, you want to really narrow your focus, right? You build a wide base to support high peaks. So for example, those proxy movements such as the Zercher triple extension, those went away after just a couple weeks because they had already done what we needed to. They helped build some resilience and some familiarity and positional skill. That way it transferred immediately over to the implements. And then from there, the wave was pretty consistent. Volume early, then some intensity, then we took a deload, and then after that we did a strong taper. And it's worth mentioning the difference between a deload and a taper. A deload just means going light. A taper usually means retaining the majority of your intensity, but with a drastic decrease in volume. And then again, throughout this wave, we didn't really change his accessories. They were just there to be subservient to the key indicator lifts, and it played out really nicely as he won the show with a comfortable lead. So congratulations to Miami's Baddest, Chris S. Anyways, hope you found this one useful. Let me know if you have any questions down below in the comments section. Again, I do offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next video.